My mother had 9 kids. She had 6 kids when she was 23 years old. That means that she brought home an infant, that she took the bus to have the child, brought home an infant, and had a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5-year-old at home. That's 6 kids under the age of 5 years old and under. And 7 years later, I was born, and I have a little brother and a little sister. And we grew up in abject poverty, stole food as kids to eat. I grew up in the 1970s. I had what I would say is a wonderful childhood because I am who I am in spite of where I come from and also because of where I come from. I have no education. I'm a kid from the streets. At 17 years old, I was living with hookers and heroin addicts in a $25 a week flop house. When I was 13 years old, my older sister died on her 21st birthday. She was 7 years older than me, literally died on the eve of her 21st birthday from a disease that ate her heart up in about 8 months. 4 months later, I went blind in my right eye at 14 years old, almost lost all of the vision in my left eye. I was able to have a surgery, very early laser surgery that saved the vision in my left eye and let me keep my right eye. I can't see out of it, but let me keep my right eye. And at that same year, a few months later in August, I was robbed by 4 guys at a bank as I was taking money out of the bank. And they beat me pretty significantly and rolled me underneath of a bench, a bus stop. It was one of the seminal moments of my life because when that happened, I woke up a couple of hours later. I rolled myself out from underneath the bus, and I got on the bus, and my nose is broken. 2 ribs are broken. The ribs still bother me to this day. I got blood down my front. Both eyes are black, and I take a bus to a transfer point where I pass out underneath another tree, wake up a couple hours later. It's now starting to get late. The sun is starting to go down. I take a bus, and I have a 1.5 mile walk to home, and really there's nobody waiting for me at home, and this is where I had an epiphany that changed my life. I stood on this corner in southeast Portland, Oregon, right before you go over the freeway, on a oversized square of sidewalk, and a voice said to me off behind me and to my right, so much so that I thought it was another human being yelling at me outside of, probably worried that they were concerned about me because of the way I looked, yelling at me from a house that was right there, and it said that everything is your fault. You're responsible for everything that happens to you. Now, I was delirious. I don't know if it was God, Jiminy Cricket, what it was, but there was a voice outside of my head to my right, a female voice that said, everything is your fault. If you don't take responsibility for everything that happens to you, you're going to be like everybody else. That's a true story on my children's eyes. I have no idea where that came from. I didn't have any counselors. I didn't have anybody at school. I didn't have anybody teaching me. I didn't have anybody to go to listen to. I was, again, a feral street kid for the most part. And yet, somehow, some way, in that delusion of that beating I took, the voice said to me, everything is your fault. And I listened, but I didn't listen right away. So I have had every job in between. I was 19, again, 17 years old. I'm living on the streets. At 19 years old, I get mugged behind a bowling alley in a pool hall for taking some money off of some folks, and some men, and they caught me in the back, and they put a 10-inch screwdriver in my back that stuck in the muscle. They were going for my kidneys. Lucky for me, as he snuck up on me from behind, I sensed that he was there because the door didn't close right away. I turned to my left because I'm blind to my right. Now, I'm right-handed. I should have turned to the right, but I didn't. I turned to my left because it had been 4 years, and now I'm used to being blind in my right eye. And so I turned to my left, and as I turned to my left, he stuck it in my right side, and it came in the one side, and it came out the side, and it got stuck in the muscle. I was able to get out from that situation. I didn't realize I'd even been stabbed until I got in my car, this car with 550,000 miles, a 1972 Datsun B210 that belched exhaust into the rotted out floorboards as you're driving this 4-speed. And until I sat back and realized there was something in my back, because that's how hyped up I was, went home. That was a Friday night, early Saturday morning. I spent 6 hours pulling the screwdriver out of my back lane in a bathtub, took the only towel I had and wrapped myself with duct tape with the towel and went to work on Monday morning. It wasn't bleeding profusely, so I knew I was not hurt well enough that I needed to go to the hospital, but I was also smart enough to know not to go to the hospital. I've seen multiple murders, 2 murders right in front of me. I've seen multiple suicides in front of me. And that was my life pretty much through into my early 20s. But the one factor that I had that probably saved me more than any is I got a job as an 11-year-old. So I paid taxes in 1980 as an 11-year-old, and I've never not paid taxes. So I'm not talking about a job working for your parents in the backyard or at their restaurant. I'm talking about I washed dishes at a restaurant for someone else on a busy Saturday as an 11-year-old, and I got paid to do it. And I never forget, I got $17.35. I went down to the local Century station or the Century grocery store, and I cashed it all for one, so I'd have this big wad of money that I saw on television. So you could flip through the money, and you thought you were pretty cool. Off to the skating rink I went to see what I could do with the money, and usually I spent it all. So that was the formative years. Having that happen to me at 14, then again at 19, going, after getting stabbed with that screwdriver and just going to work on the following Monday morning gives you an idea of, at 11 years old, I understood the connection between food and work, and those two things were linked for me for the rest of my life. Everything that happened to me after that, you just learn to roll with it. So I had job after job after job. I'd quit one job and go work at another job. I worked at McDonald's for 9 months when I was 16 years old. I learned things working at McDonald's for $3.10 an hour that I used in my businesses for the next 30 years. So they paid me to learn like that. That's the way I always approached life. And I left McDonald's to go work at Safeway. And I left Safeway to go work at a carpet warehouse. On and on, as I worked my way up until I landed in a transportation company. Figured out there was something that I could do there that I was really good at. And I worked there for the next 6-7 years. Ultimately, I got approached at 28 to start my own business with another group of guys, which I did. I grew that company to $4 million in the first year. They didn't have the money that they said they did. They came in and fired me. 17 days later, I went and started my own business. I got 6 customers to prepay me $275,000 a month to go start my own business. Banks and title companies. I got them to prepay me. I didn't know that if you went and asked questions, that the answer, I didn't know that you didn't ask questions like that. I didn't know that they would never do that. And anybody that tells you that, you hear me say that story, they're like, Jerry, no way did you get banks to pay you in advance of you doing work for them. And I'll tell you, I absolutely did. Not only that, but they prepaid me probably for 10 years before we finally figured out that we didn't need to do it. And those businesses went on to do, in my first year, I did $4 million. Average ticket price was $7. I did $4 million, then I did 8, then I did 12, then I did 14. And then I was off to the races. This life is about these things that you have that happen to you and listening to them. And so at 14 years old, when I got mugged, and I was in that mugged state, I mean, they damn near killed me. I had to hold my nose shut for 3 days to get it to stop opening. I got a little nubbin on the top of my nose now from where they broke it. And when you go through those things in life and you have the voice that tells me everything is my fault, I didn't listen to it right away, and it didn't hockey stick. But something happened 14 years later. I was 28 years old, and my son was born. My first son, my first child. I was never going to have kids until I met my wife, and all she wanted to do was have kids. And so I went along with that, and my son was born. And so at the same time my son was born, I had a half remodeled house, and I got approached about starting this new business. I was sitting at a desk in that office, and I had run this company now for years, and we were doing about $5 million a year. We were doing $1 million when I started. I was fantastic at the operations side. I mean, I knew everything there was to know about operations. And the guys that worked for me were all older than me. And I remember them telling me all of the time, they're in their 40s and 50s, and they'd say, Jerry, let me tell you something that is absolutely true, that you don't know anything until you're 40 years old. I'm 26-year-old hotshot. I think I have all of the answers. I think I know everything. And I remember scoffing at them, saying, "This is you work for me. How it is that you can say what you're telling me?" As I sat there and I had that epiphany, the epiphany said that if you don't shut up and listen, literally. Now, this was not. This is at 28 years old. I have this pro forma in front of me. I'm looking at these financials, and I don't know what it is. I'd never seen this before. And that's when the voice came to me again. This time, not quite so dramatic. It wasn't outside of my head. It was inside of my head. But it said, shut up and listen. You're going to be doing the same thing when you're 50 if you don't shut up and listen. I have no idea where these voices come from. I have no idea how this is a thing. But I'm telling you that is absolutely reality for me. So much so that I sat there and I listened to it and I looked up. There's a window in my office and I could see the 50-year-old drivers out there. And it made sense to me. I don't want to be sitting there when I'm 50. I thought I knew everything, but I had this P&L in front of me. I had a forward-looking set of financials that gave me some sense of what they thought this business would do, and I had no idea what I was looking at. But it was the perfect moment. Started when I was 14 years old when they mugged me at 14, where the voice told me everything is your fault, take responsibility for everything that happens to you. And then my son's born, and now I have a purpose that is beyond myself, a purpose that is beyond the selfish self that was my life up to that point. There's nothing wrong with living for your life. But one second my son is born, and it's time for me to go to war. All I could think about is he will have a better life than I did. And so that drive was born in me the second he came out. So you combine that with what happened to me at 14, and everything is my fault, and you layer that on top, and then you go, all right, now my son is 6, 8, 9 months at this point, and this pro forma shows up, and I don't know what I'm looking at. And all of a sudden I'm saying to myself, you got to shut up and listen. If you want for your children, if you want for your son, at that point I have 2 other children since, if you want for your son what you claim to want for your son, you're going to have to shut up and listen. If my son had not been born, I don't know that I would have listened to that voice. I don't know that that voice would have made sense. But the animal was awoken in me when my son was born. Now, again, I had achieved some success. I was running this company. I had some renown. People were approaching me about spending millions of dollars to get a business started. I'm a street kid at 17 years old. What the hell do I know? I got a chip on my shoulder bigger than the Empire State Building. I was incorrigible. I was terrible. But my son being born changed me overnight. And all of a sudden, as I was approached about this, and the voice says to me, shut up and listen, I listened, and I shut it up. And I got rid of all of the friends that I had, because all we did is watch sports, talk sports, listen to sports, eat while watching, talking, and listening about sports, and then, of course, always arguing about sports. That was the center of my life, and I got rid of all of them, all of the friends that commiserated with me, everybody that I had grown up with, the people in my life at the time. I got rid of almost every single one of them, and I flipped, and I went and found people that were smarter than me, people that knew more things than I did. I had to shut up and listen, because the voice told me to. I had to shut up and listen because my son was born, and I needed to go out and I needed to provide at a level that would be unimaginable to anybody from the same position that I was in. I had to shut up and listen because all those years earlier, everything is my fault. Standing on that street corner, broken nose, 2 ribs broken, not knowing if I was going to die, I heard that voice tell me everything was my fault, and it was my job to take responsibility for all of it. So when that paper showed up, everything, all of those pieces coagulated. They all came together, they tightened up, they firmed up, and off I went, and I took that offer. And again, it failed in the first year, not because of what I did. I did $4 million in revenue, which I didn't know was a whole bunch of money for a startup. But they didn't have the money to finance that. So they ran out of cash, so they fired me, and I turned around and started my business, as I talked about earlier. But really, the 14-year-old epiphany, the 28-year-old epiphany, and right before that epiphany, the birth of my son. And if I was to put anyone in any particular order, the birth of my son is number 1, because the other 2 don't happen. The birth of my son and the subsequent birth of my daughter and my next son, I have 3 children, catapulted me in a way, drove me in a way that I was going to be successful. I was going to take risk and sacrifice and do whatever I had to do, unimaginable heights that I ended up reaching, simply because I was going to give them a better life than I had.